high straight thing.
Survive 5 with 4.
Hall of Famer Tito Santana.
Built 5 wrestling golden up.
Stuff. Just enjoy wrestling.
Wedding 5 jeans, bro.
What's your opinion?
And something like that than I have ever found. You know what? I really love to see Vince Russo every week saying that he's wetting his jeans, bro.
You know, all these other podcasters in this area don't like Russo, but we do. We're Russo guys.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you have sat through WCW in 1999 before he showed up, when Bischoff was clearly burnt out. This new era of WCW that started right here on week 4 of our rewatch project on April 5th, 1999.
This is by far the most miserable week of shows we've had to watch yet.
It is. It was a rough week. For some reason, we started out with a Singapore Cane match. Hack against Kendall Windham.
Dude, I loved Sandman in ECW. He does not fit the WCW product. I think it's ridiculous that they had him in the company in 99.
Yeah.
And I'm a fan.
Yeah, it was pretty pitiful. That match was just, it was 5 minutes of boredom, which really just kind of kills a crowd to me.
Well, speaking of 5 minutes of boredom, that brings us to our second match also, which is Konnan versus Lizmark Jr.
Yeah, we'll get into Konnan more later. Then we get into an absolutely awful 6-minute match with Scott Steiner and Ming because Steiner was heated at DDP for some random reason. I know a year later we get into real backstage stuff between DDP and Steiner.
When I saw that it was going to be Scott and Ming, I said, okay, finally. This should be relatively fun. It wasn't. It was no fun at all. It was torture to sit through. And I'm a big fan of both guys, but you mentioned Steiner being burnt out at this point, and that's pretty clear.
Yeah. Then the next match, we get Jim Duggan, who touching little vignette they did for Jim with his cancer diagnosis and his comeback. It was nice. Duggan was never going to be a main event guy, though. So
the time had passed for that.
Yeah, he beat Lenny Lane real quick. Really forgettable match. Then
I know that's weird that I said that because he wrestled in WWE till 2012, but
we get into your highlight of all of this rewatch project, figuring out who the new leader of the NWO Black and White is going to be.
Man, this is my favorite angle of anything that's going on right now. I love the idea of Hollywood Hogan filling every one of these guys' head with bullshit. I think that's hilarious. And it's like the Three Stooges, basically, at this point.
The Four Stooges.
Yeah.
And Stevie Ray ends up.
Worse exists, but yeah, Stevie Ray wins this. It was awful.
The worst battle royal I've ever heard of.
And it wasn't even fun.
No.
Yeah.
And it was almost 8 minutes long.
Yeah, it was too long.
Yeah. Next up, we get on paper, you get excited. Rey Mysterio and Billy Kidman against Perry Saturn and Raven for the WCW World Tag Team titles.
Dude, I am so sick of the disqualifications already.
Well, I'm pretty sure that every time that Raven is in a match, they say, is this under Raven's rules? Because he gets his chair out to do his drop toe hold. If that's the case, why are his matches ending in disqualification?
Yeah, at that point, just make every match he's in no DQ.
Yeah, that's what the point of Raven's rules was supposed to be back then.
Right. Yeah,
but apparently,
and neither does Bischoff, obviously.
No, at this point, I think Bischoff hated his time in WCW.
Can I talk about the next match?
Yeah, go ahead.
Booker T versus Chris Jericho. If I had $1 for every time I've seen that since we started this rewatch, I probably wouldn't have the podcast. And we'll talk more about that also later. From there, we get into Buff Bagwell and Bam Bam.
Yeah, that ends with a really horrible fire extinguisher spot. Because Chastity runs in and it fills up so much of the area with powder that nobody can see. Buff can't see to hit the spot. He jumps down from the turnbuckle and taps Bam Bam so he gets where he needs to be. And then they do the blockbuster. It was awful.
Did they hate Bam Bam or something? Man, they booked him like garbage.
I'm pretty sure they did. I'm pretty sure there was some resentment there towards Bam Bam. Because
I love Bam Bam. I never understood why they would book him the way they did. He had just come off the run of his career in ECW.
Whoever took over on the booking committee after Starrcade of '98 must have really hated Bam Bam. Because he went into Starrcade going after Goldberg. And this is where he's at 4 months later.
Yeah. Jobbing out to Buff Bagwell.
Are you about to be jobbing out to Hack at the pay-per-view?
Oh. Well, anywho, that brings us to the main event.
Yeah, buddy. The main event, the crowd is chanting, "We want Sting" at this point, because for 2 weeks we've built up Sting's going to talk.
We're seeing him in the crowd. Yeah. We're in the rafters.
Yeah. Well, no, we saw a cameraman up there in a trench coat.
No, we saw Sting up there last week.
Well, we get to the main event. Kevin Nash is on commentary. If Goldberg wins this match, then Kevin Nash gets a world title shot at the pay-per-view. And the other match won't be for the title.
It just doesn't make any sense.
So explain to me why Kevin Nash comes in and attacks Goldberg as he's about to win.
Because nobody knows what's happening.
Nash runs in at almost the 11-minute mark and interrupts this match. Then Sting comes down from the rafters.
Sting!
Yeah, and points at the camera or the big screen in the corner where Macho Man is doing a voiceover and announces that we're going to have Hogan, DDP, Flair, and Sting for the title with Macho as the referee. So what the hell would Sting have done if Nash hadn't interfered and gotten the disqualification?
I don't know, man, but another question that I've got, how many fatal four-ways you ever seen in your life that end via disqualification?
Well, none of them, because it's supposed to be Texas Tornado rules, which means anybody can be in there at the same time.
Well, not in WCW. And that show sucked. Fuck that Nitro. That was the worst.
You said it. Shame on you, sir.
Sorry, Stovers. It's part of the new deal. I get 10 now. 10 per episode.
You get 10.
I talk to him, yeah. 10.
We're
up in the ante.
You get 5 now.
Thunder.
Yeah. God, what was the opener on Thunder?
All right, so we started out okay. We did Evan Courageous versus Mysterio Jr.
Yeah, outrageous Evan Courageous.
We started out awesome, dude. Evan Courageous was so good.
And then, of course, Mysterio retains his Cruiserweight title. I did love that Ray was defending the belt every week, just like Kidman had.
Mysterio is on another level in 99, bro. He is ridiculous.
We get Wrath against Damien.
Yeah.
And at this point, my wife's like, well, good Lord, is he 7 foot tall? And I'm like, no, that referee's really short, and so is the guy's wrestling.
So at this point, I'm wondering, because we've watched 4 of these, 4 weeks so far.
Uh-huh.
And Wrath has been squashing people every week, basically, give or take. Can we get him in a storyline, maybe? Would be a plan here? That
would have made sense, wouldn't it? Maybe Wrath should have been in this U.S. title tournament.
I mean, shit, Jerry Flynn is getting more screen time or more storyline development than Wrath at this point, and Wrath is getting squash matches every week.
And I really don't remember. Maybe we'll see that in the coming weeks.
Hopefully, because I'm
we'll get
definitely waiting for something here.
I remember, I'm pretty sure him and Bam Bam at some point, so I guess that's his first step up, is to beat Bam Bam.
Oh my
maybe?
god! Of course it is.
I don't remember.
Well, then we get the Hack again versus Mikey Whipwreck, which is just ECW shenanigans.
25-year-old Mikey Whipwreck. Didn't realize he was that young.
Hey, here's the thing. We screw around a lot about these ECW guys. Mikey was pretty good.
And Mikey could go. I really think that Mikey
was,
could have been
he
a
was
really
pretty
good star.
I know he wasn't in WCW long.
No, I think that if he had maybe if he'd gone to WWE instead of going back to ECW, I think he might have been better there.
Now, I enjoyed this match way more than I enjoyed Hack's match on Dynamite against Kendall Windham.
You mean on Nitro?
Or on Nitro, yeah. Shit. Sorry, Tony.
Yeah.
Next, we get our favorite underrated luchador, Blitzkrieg.
Probably the most fun match of the whole episode.
Yeah, Super Kalo was cool too.
We get trying to get that centered. There we go. We get Blitzkrieg and Super Kalo. I really liked Blitzkrieg. I always thought he was a fun wrestler.
Yeah, Blitzkrieg is a blast.
He is. He picks up the win, which then gets him a match on the pay-per-view against Juventud Guerrero.
And I know that's gonna rock.
Yes. It will be a fun time, I'm sure. A great chance for this young, upcoming cruiserweight that at the time I'm sure they thought they would have for years.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
We all did.
Then we get to Raven versus Chris Benoit that ends in disqualification.
Just kill the storyline.
Well, they're fighting at the pay-per-view in a tag team match.
Drop the storyline because every match is DQ, and I guarantee you, and I've not seen it, I guarantee you it's a DQ at the pay-per-view. You know what else I guarantee that'll be at the pay-per-view?
What?
Booker T versus Chris Jericho in the main event.
No, they won't be fighting at the pay-per-view, but they are going to be the main event of Thunder. Imagine.
Yeah, imagine that.
If you
once
will.
Again, another dollar in the bucket.
Being a 13-year-old, getting tickets to a WCW Thunder, and this is your main event match. A not established Booker T, a not established Chris Jericho, that would be the reaction right there, a yawn. It was not a fun main event. It ended, and I'm just ready to get to the pay-per-view because I remember
they have to stop.
The pay-per-view
They've got to stop Booker T versus Jericho. They've got to stop it.
Well, don't worry. He's going to show up in WWE soon, or WWF.
I know. I'm waiting. They've got to stop this. But you know what else you know what else you've got to stop to do? You know what else you got to stop doing?
What?
You got to stop smoking, man.
Well, you know how you stop smoking?
How?
You ditch the paper and you get to vapor.
That's right.
Go ahead, bro.
Our friends at Magic Vapor Shop. My people, my family. www.magicvaporshop.com. We've got 9 locations, guys. Come check us out. We've been helping people quit smoking since 2017. It's a great business. You're going to love the way you look when you leave the place with a new vape in your hand. And Aaron guarantees it.
You know who always... We need to get better with it. This will be a lot better when we're back in the studio soon.
Mm-hmm. Could it be really soon?
It could be really soon.
Oh.
Now, something that didn't really need a lot of work back in the day was the heat that Dennis Rodman was getting when he showed up on Monday Nitro back in the day with the NWO.
Rodman was awesome in that role.
Well, that was the wrestling shirt that my brother had to have even back in the day.
Rodman?
Yeah. Because he thought it was cool. Yeah, of course.
It is cool.
It was a very cool shirt. It was just Rodman with sunglasses on and an NWO shirt.
Yep.
But the publicity that they got off of him, it was amazing to see all the photographers at ringside when he showed up at Uncensored 97. And then all of the attention that they would get at Bash at the Beach and at Road Wild with teaming with Hogan against Karl Malone and DDP and teaming with him against Lex Luger and the Giant.
Yep.
It was fun to see that back then.
Yeah, man. Dennis Rodman was probably my favorite wrestling crossover.
Well, and we will see Rodman appear one more time in WCW in 1999. Not going to spoil anything because we've been doing the rewatch.
That's exciting. I didn't know he showed back up in 99.
Yes, he does. He does against Randy Macho Man Savage in his prime.
Is he still too sweet?
Oh no, this is part of the era that got Savage taken off of TV. Yeah,
that's gonna be a lot of fun for me then.
So then we have Rodman Down Under, his one-off wrestling event in Australia. That the main event was Kurt Hennig against Dennis Rodman for the whatever their title was. It was an Australian Outback match. So that was the I-Generation Championship.
If anybody was going to get a good match out of Rodman, Kurt Hennig was probably the guy to have the match with.
Yeah. Well,
probably a good choice.
He appears on Hulk Hogan's Championship Wrestling, where he would wrestle against Dustin Diamond and Butterbean. He would then go on even to show up with AEW, where he was confronted by Jeff Jarrett in Chicago. Saved by the Acclaimed and Billy Gunn, if you remember back in the day.
Dennis Rodman likes wrestling.
He does, clearly, and it's always fun to see him randomly pop up.
Yeah, a lot of wrestling crossovers can be fun, man. We've seen a lot of that over the years.
That's why we're going to have more people on these crossovers in the weeks and months to come. We got to thinking about this on a Till 5 vacation road trip the other day.
A very fun road trip.
Yeah, went and made some new friends at Space Apes in Bristol, Tennessee.
Hey, yeah, go check them out.
Yeah, go check them out. Or maybe go see our good friends, if you're in Tennessee, at Green Hemp Company in Greenville, Tennessee. That one's a freebie, folks.
Hot Don, I wrote you, but you still ain't calling.
Poor Tan. He's not quite the pimp that King Konnan was back in the day.
Yep, he must have been, because his wrestling ability really didn't do nothing for me.
No, I don't think Konnan was ever that great of a worker.
Yeah, obviously, we're missing something with early days Konnan. I don't know.
Well, here's what happened. In Mexico City, wrestling was banned in the 60s. And that meant that the only wrestling people could see was their local. That ban got lifted in the 90s. The same time that Konnan was getting his first push, he was starting to appear on soap operas. He was making a rap album. He was becoming a celebrity, much like Rodman, a crossover, except Konnan actually wanted to dedicate his time to wrestling.
Interesting. Well, that explains the first 10 years of his career, basically.
Yeah, that explains why he was over so much and why WCW and WWE fought for him and ECW fought to keep him.
Well, he famously, in the early 90s, 1990, Vince wanted to sign him. Okay.
Well, he needed to be Max Moon.
Vince did sign him, and he was going to play the Max Moon character, but because of backstage stuff and Konnan publicly trashing the character at any possible event, while he was under contract, he just started taking. Well,
if you see, there's a little Max Moon poking in on the corner up there.
Yep.
Yeah.
He just started taking in Mexico, dude, while he was under contract, and just never went back.
He hated it, and that's why he was never given the respect that he deserved by Vince McMahon.
That's true. It's very weird now that WWE and AAA have a partnership to see it was very weird to look at the images and see the clips from World Collide and see Konnan on commentary on a WWE show.
Well, it's a new era for them. Clearly, it's not an era that's meant for me and you to enjoy.
No, it's not.
Speaking
of enjoyed, we can talk about the good Konnan stuff now. You were getting into WCW.
Yes, I was. In WCW, he debuts with his Mexican World Championship, wrestles Psychosis. It's a way of bringing him in with some immediate establishment.
Yep.
He would end up winning the U.S. title from One Man Gang.
Now, I do think that we should touch on that he was partially responsible for the signing, or for WCW being able to sign Mysterio Jr., Psychosis, Hoovy, and La Parka.
Yeah, that's well.
Which is pretty
That's
cool.
why I called him King Konnan, because he kind of was the king of the luchadors and the luchador movement that came through in WCW.
He sort of was their spokesman when they all came to the States, in a way.
Ironically, the man without a mask. You see him there with his U.S. title.
Yep.
Back in the day.
Yep.
But after losing the belt, he ends up joining the Dungeon of Doom.
Now, I didn't know that till we talked about that a few weeks ago. You mentioned that to me. I did not know that.
Yeah, Konnan was part of the Dungeon of Doom before he joined the NWO.
I did not know he was in the Dungeon of Doom. It must have been a very short-lived thing.
Well, the Dungeon of Doom, that was in early 96, mid 96.
So that was the alliance to destroy Hogan, basically, right?
Well, this was almost after, like that had thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
This was towards the end of the alliance to kill Hulkamania. He shows up and ends up joining them to try and make him credible without just being a champion or being a luchador. It didn't work. They put him in the NWO, and that worked.
Yeah, he was very charismatic, is one thing you can say about Konnan.
Yeah. He ends up being in the NWO, leaving that in 99, kicked out of it in 99, goes into a feud with Disco for a never-ending feud with Disco Inferno.
And it sucks.
It's awful, La Cucaracha.
Well, then No Limit Soldiers and Filthy Animals start happening.
Yes.
Yep.
And then he kind of rides the Filthy Animals train through the end of WCW.
Joins TNA in 03.
Kind of doesn't really have much of a choice of where to go. He's in Mexico, and if he's coming to the States, WWE wasn't going to give him a shot. So
he ends up working in TNA, where they start 3 Live Crew, which was kind of a sort of Filthy Animals adjacent to TNA.
It was very it was very random, to be honest. You took 3 guys who had similar gimmicks in other companies and put them together.
It worked, though. They had really good Konnan. Of course, we're talking about 3 Live Crew with Konnan, Road Dogg Jesse James, or BG James, as he was known there, and Relevant Ron Killings.
Currently relevant Ron Killings.
Yeah, always relevant Ron Killings.
And Konnan ends up being much more of a talker for him because his health starts getting to be an issue.
Yeah, which is fine because I thought he was much better in that role.
Yes, he was great as a manager for LAX.
Yep, that was coming up next. We were going to get into that. That
was my segue.
Once 3 Live Crew ended, he was at that point. I think he wrestled a match or 2 to finish up that storyline, and then that was the end of his wrestling, as far as I know.
Yeah,
before he kind of just managed LAX.
He appeared a few times in like 6-man tags with LAX, stuff like that. But pretty much,
I'm sure he didn't take many bombs.
No. Yeah. Well, he ended up having to have a kidney transplant. And at that point, you can't work the same. Yeah, Konnan about died from kidney failure, and that's
awful.
Yeah, we can both relate.
Well, good to see that he's okay.
Yeah. Now, I would imagine that part of the reason that wrestling was banned in Mexico was a lot of the violence that came around in the 60s, particularly with wrestlers like
Bruiser Brody.
Bruiser Brody.
Yeah, now, so I learned something about Bruiser. I did not know that he was trained by Fritz von Erich.
Okay.
That's kind of cool, and that adds to the Von Erich tragedy in a way, almost.
Yeah, he's adjacent to the Von Erichs.
He's adjacent to the Von Erichs. But he started his career in 73 in the Texas Territories. And he just never really signed with anybody, just kind of freelanced around doing what he wanted to do. And then in 85, he very briefly joins New Japan. Feuds with Antonio Inoki. He is immediately over in Japan. He realizes that, so he starts going to All Japan, where he teams with Stan Hansen.
And that's pretty much the only stuff that I've seen is him and Stan Hansen just beating the dog shit out of people.
Well, dude, if you've never seen it, people listening to the show, if you've never seen this, go Google Bruiser Brody's entrance in the Tokyo Dome, where he's coming out, slinging the chain, and coming through the crowd, and people are terrified of him. They're running away. It's really neat.
And that's part of the mystique of him, because he was actually a really nice guy by all accounts backstage.
Yeah.
He played his character.
But everybody that's ever seen an episode of Till 5 knows I'm probably the biggest Stan Hansen mark there is. Stan and Brody together was the chef's kiss, my friend.
Good deal.
So from there,
it's certified by the Canadian here.
It's true.
That Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen are 5 stars.
So Brody then gets fired in Japan. All right.
Of course he does.
And he ends up in 1987 working for World Wrestling Council in Puerto Rico, Carlos Colon's promotion, where he starts a feud with Abdullah the Butcher and then gets into a feud with Carlos Colon. Now, during this time is where it ends pretty poorly for Bruiser.
Yeah.
So during this time,
stabbed backstage.
In the shower by a fellow wrestler in 1988.
Wasn't it Carlos Colon?
No, it was that underling of Carlos Colon that did it.
Well, whatever.
Same difference. Carlos Colon. Some people say, some people say Carlos Colon may have had something to do with this whole deal.
Coulda. So Bruiser Brody had a lot of influence in wrestling over the years. You see, honestly, the most I think you see in Brody Lee. Luke Harper.
Absolutely.
He looked just like him, acted like him.
I mean, honestly, man, I even saw Bruiser Brody influence in a guy like Abyss coming out with the chain, like Bruiser used to come out with. The Pit Bulls in ECW, big Bruiser marks.
Well, you saw it for sure with his former tag team partner. We talked about him last week.
Big
the Berserker.
The Berserker as well. You could see that kind of style. Now, Stan Hansen was adjacently working that style, of course, but a little bit later on, you saw Terry Gordy and Steve Williams kind of adopt that.
Yeah, there was a lot of really. I feel like Bruiser Brody was one of the first strong style guys.
Very, very influential.
Yeah, he was, and kind of helped innovate that style and tough men. And if you're somebody who's looking to change some things, maybe be a tough man who wants to do some remodeling in your home, perhaps you need to go see our good friends at Stover's Liquidation. In particular, our good friends at 481 Tulsa Road in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, 37830. You can call them at 865-523-4449. They're available 24 hours online at www.stoversliquidation.com. They have liquidation, wholesale home improvement, truckload quantities are available. They're closed on Sundays. Go see these people for the best deals that you're going to find on flooring and home appliances. Everything that you need. You need a new bathtub? Go see Stover's. You need a new flooring? Go see Stover's. Just go see our good friends at Stover's. They've got everything.
What? So let's go into the last segment here. I'm actually really excited about this one. This was actually recommended on our Till 5 road trip by Mrs. Bird.
Yes. She said that maybe we need to talk more about Mick Foley.
And we both agreed.
Yeah, and we didn't want to do like everybody else does with the 3 faces of Foley. So because in reality, that's only talking about one company he's been in. So we went with the 3 phases of Foley.
That's right.
For the phases of his career.
So obviously, if you know anything about Mick Foley, you have to start with the fact that he started out his career as a backyard wrestler, jumping off his roof and being a lunatic.
Dude loved showing the heart and diving off like Jimmy Snuka. Yep.
Little later, he started working as a jobber for the WWF in the late 80s as Jack Foley.
Yeah. Now this was I do love the fact that Mick was somebody who, like, if you've seen Black Dahlia on Facebook, or Paige Cornett, I think is her real name. If you've seen her, she was somebody who gave up everything and ran to try to be a wrestler. That's the same thing Foley did. Foley lived in his car. The man was eating peanut butter out of a jar so he could train to wrestle. It was something cheap that he could eat. And that was Mick Foley loved this business. That's why
he
Foley
really
doesn't.
did.
Yeah, Foley doesn't get one segment. We're going to do 3 separate phases of Foley. This was the phase that Mick was a poor guy, willing to do whatever job he could.
Foley gave his entire life for this business.
Absolutely.
He put it all on the line numerous times.
You know, he goes around to WWF and is a jobber as Jack Foley, never really gets a shot. Keeps working the indies. WCW decides, maybe we'll bring this guy in late 80s. It's Cactus Jack. And
in 89,
yeah. He doesn't really click at first.
No, so they send him on an excursion to All Japan.
Which of the woods.
Which is pretty cool. He's only there for like 8 months. He doesn't really have any feuds while he's there, but he does have some fun matches. Stan Hansen, Dr. Death, Terry. I mean, come on. He's around. Sabu was hanging out in All Japan a little bit during this time in the early days.
Now, confession for me is when he comes back from All Japan, we're in my favorite era of Mick Foley.
And some of his best feuds outside of WWF in this era.
I loved Mick Foley and Abdullah the Butcher as like besties that were beating the crap out of each other.
Yeah.
The Halloween Havoc 91 Chamber of Horrors match is hands down my favorite bit of wrestle crap there's ever been.
Have
you ever seen it?
I have seen tidbits. I don't know if I've actually watched the entire match.
Dude, they drop an electric chair down through the ceiling.
Yeah, I've seen that. I have seen that.
Electrocute Abdullah, and then he wakes up and beats up all the ghouls that have shown up with a stretcher to carry him out, and him and Mick Foley fight to the back, or Cactus Jack fight to the back. It was great. I absolutely loved that era of Mick Foley.
I bet you did.
You have him feuding with Vader, which is where he lost the ear in Germany.
That is one of my favorite feuds he had, man. Him and Vader had a great chemistry.
They were fine beating the crap out of each other.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He has some fun matches with Sting along the way.
Stinger has a couple decent matches with Paul Orndorff.
Yes. Pretty good tag team with Max Payne briefly. They win the tag team titles for like 2 weeks.
Yep.
Doesn't really do much.
From there, he's gone. And he'd
hit a point where it wasn't worth it for him to stay there because he wasn't making enough money to feed his family like he wanted to.
So he pops into Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and he starts feuding with Chris Candido, actually, which is fun, and actually how he finds his way into ECW in the same year. He joins ECW in 94.
He joins ECW in 94, teams with the very young Mikey Whipwreck that we were talking about earlier.
Who he trained.
Yeah, he trained. He feuds with the Sandman.
Starts an alliance with Tommy Dreamer.
Yeah, and that's where we'll end phase 1.
Well, let me start by saying that at the same time that all this is happening, this is when he is also working for IWA of Japan, where he starts crossing paths and starts his famous lifelong love-hate relationship with Terry Funk.
Well, that's where we're going to get more in depth into his ECW.
I just want to say that's where we're going.
Yeah.
That's where we're headed.
We're heading there. Now, if you're somebody local to our area in London, Kentucky, and you have, a few free hours on July 12th, maybe you'd like to go to Triple Crown Wrestling. You could go to the 2025 Commonwealth Professional Wrestling Legacy Hall of Fame induction, where you can see Jonathan Barnes, Aries, Professor Bear, James Kendrick, you can see all these people and more inducted into the Hall of Fame. You can see some professional wrestling. The doors are going to open at 6:30. Bell time of 7:05. You can go see Tanner's favorite podcaster, Joe Monroe.
That's right.
In person. Tan has said that he will not be making an appearance until he gets inducted himself.
That's a fact. Put me in the Hall of Fame and we'll talk. I've got just the same amount of accolades as Professor Bear.
That's fair. So on that note, Joe Monroe, I believe that Tan thinks of you the same as he does Bill Goldberg.
I don't. Joe's not even that bad. Fuck Bill Goldberg.